Good evening, everyone. My name is Ni Odai, and I bring you greetings from Accra Church this evening. Today, we have something special for all of us, and I believe that we are all ready for that. And before we go into it, I just want us to take our first hymn. That's the opening hymn, MHB 247. So our opening hymn is MHB 247. Okay, so as we all know, the month of August is our family month, and this year we have wonderful topics that have been treated so far. First week, second week, we are in the third week, and the main theme for the family month is walking the Asian path in contemporary shoes. So yes, that is the main theme for the month. And for today, we are looking at a discussion around loss. Okay, it's a discussion around loss. And then I believe, God, that after the end of this discussion, we will live blessed. Amen.
Hello, everyone. A special hello to all our members of Accra Church. This is Anaviosi. This month for Anaviosi, we are celebrating families. We are in Family Month at Red Church, and today we are having an open conversation around loss. Family Month is coming to you with the theme of walking in the ancient paths in contemporary shoes, and that's what we have for Family Month this month at Red Church. And in today's Anaviosi, we are having an open conversation around loss. More specifically, I'm here today with Dr. Ayongo and Dr. and Mrs. Lamptey, and we are about to go into the topic of emptiness syndrome and miscarriages. So I'm going to allow my panelists to tell me why they think they've been invited by the church to speak on these topics. So first, Dr. and Mrs. Lamptey, why do you think we've asked you to talk about emptiness syndrome?
Well, because we are experiencing emptiness right now, so, and we have been through it for more than 15 years, so we believe that we know what exactly it means and feels.
To be in an emptiness. Okay, thank you. Dr. Ayongo, about miscarriages, why do you think the church wants
I have
you?
experienced about 5 miscarriages.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I believe that
You're highly experienced in the topic. How many children do you have
I
today?
have 2 children.
2 children.
Yes.
Great. So my panelists are very experienced, and we're about to get into conversation around emptiness syndrome and miscarriages. So, Dr. Lamptey, that's a long time, over a decade, in an empty nest. Emptiness syndrome, we've learned, is that grief that many parents feel when their children move out of home. There has been an argument made that, before you even have children, that period before you have children could also be an emptiness. But for you, today, having the actual sense of an emptiness where your children have gone, what has been the best part of it for you?
The emptiness.
Yes.
Well, the best part will be the rich recollections of the good days when our daughter was home, and we compare it sometimes unconsciously with the present time when she's out of the home. Of course, she's in touch, constantly in touch, especially with the mother. We all converse and all that, so we don't feel the emptiness. But still, there's something to miss. There's a nostalgia that we have about the good old days.
Okay. And Mrs. Lamptey, what would you say has been the toughest part? That unexpected. You knew one day your child would leave home, and possibly yes, you've thought about it. But what did you not expect about this emptiness situation?
The reality of it. And we have just one child, an only child.
Okay.
So you can imagine that when the nest was emptied, it was very, very difficult, because she used to call us the 3-member family. So when one is gone, it's very difficult. And because she was an only child, you can imagine that we bonded, and we were her friends. So then suddenly that third force is not there. And Nalamne is around you all the time, talking, asking many questions. So in her absence, the house was too quiet. I mean, too quiet for comfort. And that's difficult.
That's difficult. So I would ask though that, like I was saying earlier, there's been debates about emptiness syndrome. I had a conversation with Reverend Akama as well. What would you call that period before? There are some couples that haven't had children right away, with
We
a
were
long
in that
stretch.
situation.
Okay. All right.
Yes, we had Nalamne 4 years after we were married.
Okay.
there is stress. I can't even say loneliness because because we didn't have a child. My husband and I really bonded, so the loneliness is not there. The kind of loneliness you experience when the children have left home. Then the period in which you don't have children, it's a different feeling. You see, when the children have left home, you know that they are coming back. You can go visit them, you can call. But if you don't have any child at all, it's an entirely different situation. And then there's this anxiety all the time. I was just telling doctor that just before I had my period, it was a time of agony. And so the day when my period came was sheer agony. That's not the same as having children who have left the home. It's a different kind of emptiness.
Yeah, that's true. What would you say, it means that even while, yes, you bonded before you had your child, but it also suggests that even when you had your child, there was still a very good relationship, friendship building between the two of you. Because I suppose that's how you last that long, even after the child is gone.
Exactly.
Right.
So I would say that because there had just been the two of us before, when our daughter actually left, it's like we went back to what we used to be.
Right.
So maybe for us as a couple, it was slightly easier.
Okay.
Because we had learned to be with each other. We had bonded. We did everything together. So going back to it was not too difficult. You know, there are some couples who live separate lives. So when the children leave, especially the mothers who are so stuck to their children and to the exclusion of their husbands. So when the children go, then the mother is totally lost.
Yeah.
Yes, we didn't experience it because we were already bonded anyway.
Yeah.
We were into each other already.
Yeah.
Not only was an additional bonus that God gave us. So when she left, it's like God says, okay, go back to the original thing.
Yeah.
Because indeed, marriage is between the two of you. The children are an addition. They are not part of the couple as such. It's like a circle in which they are. So you do not sacrifice the relationship between the two of you because you have children. You have to have your own way of doing things, just the two of you.
That's true. So they say that life is lived forward but understood backward. Would you say that 4 years before you finally had a child would then have been a positive in your marriage because then it allowed you to bond properly?
Yes. And there was freedom. Even though we were yearning for a child, we were free. I mean, when we went out, we didn't have to think about the baby at home who would be crying and needing us. We left home and returned when we felt like it. For example, on Sundays after church, we go visit friends. And sometimes you get home at 8 p.m. We were free. We really enjoy the freedom.
Yeah.
You go where you want, return what you want. But the moment, and then you sleep when you want, you eat when you want. But the moment the baby comes,
Changes
your life
the
is
game.
completely a different ballgame.
True. But Dr. Ayongo, you have younger children. How old are your children today?
Yeah, so they are 12 and 9.
12 and 9. One day they would also go and live their lives. Have you thought about that before?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I have. But not very deep.
Yeah.
you have time.
Yes.
That's confused.
Good.
But that's crossed my mind.
Right. Okay. Do you think that parents with young children, anticipate the time? Do you think is there an age you think they'll get to and you say you can't wait till they go? Sometimes when you are frustrated with your children.
Yes, you may say or think that, but
you're never ready.
I mean, you are so busy going about things that it doesn't really. It's not like a major thought at least for
at
me.
the time, yeah, of
I
course.
mean, at this
When you
time.
have younger children,
Yes.
sure. Dr. Lamptey, how do you think adult children contribute towards maintaining family stability? Today, your child, is a parent also. She has her family, but how do you think she contributes to maintaining stability between you and then, your whole family?
The extended family.
Yes. You as a small family unit.
the nuclear family.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I don't think I get the question.
Okay, so I'm asking, How do you think your daughter,
Yeah.
you know, she's still your daughter, even though she's grown
she
and she
is
has a
very much
family.
so. She enjoys it.
Yes, how does she contribute to you and your wife still staying as a family?
Oh, a lot. She contributes a lot. You know, she had been the center of our feelings, our thoughts, and all that. And she maintains a regular contact with us. Regular contact. She calls their mother every morning, and they talk. And then probably in the evening they run it all up again. And she reminds us of past days, past times, and all.
So she's not there, but she's still
Oh,
a
yeah, she's
present.
constantly there.
Okay.
And
Do you
then
think
she's-
there's something you did to make sure she's still present, or it just so happens that she was raised in a tight knit family, so she stays with that?
Yes, it was a tight family setting.
She was a dadaba.
The facts are coming out.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, she was very close to me.
Okay.
And sometimes she'll complain. And then I will tell her that she's my blood relation, and she is my daughter is my blood relation, but she is not my blood relation. So
I will
she
explain
lives-
what happened. I was jealous the way they were so close. So one day I said, "Now Lamptey, I am Mrs. Lamptey, you are Miss Lamptey, and you came 4 years after I had the man." Then surprisingly he goes, "Gloria, but she's my blood relation, you are not." You can
These are
imagine
the
my
facts.
chagrin.
These are the facts. Yeah.
I couldn't fight it because it was the truth.
It was the truth. It was the truth. It was the truth. So, you know, Dr. and Mrs. Lamptey, today our world is so different from the world that you got married in, and you know, your weight, and then having your child, and then having a new life again, or back to your old life when your child left. Today, there's a trend, and some would even debate, it's always been there, of late divorce, late onset of divorce. You know, most recently, a lot of these American billionaires are going through their own divorce. Bill Gates and his wife, Jeff Bezos and his wife. These are very wealthy men. Maybe Mr. Lamptey knows something we don't know, but the wealthy men seem to be ready to get divorced. And this is like late onset divorce. But even in a Christian context, there are still such situations. You know, what do you think is accounting for that? Does that emptiness have something to do with it? Does it seem like now that the children are not there, we don't have a reason to be together? So, you know, what do you, in your opinion, what do you think is fueling
Well,
this?
There have been times when women, married women, may complain about your placement as uneasiness, right, in the family setting. And then when friends interject and say, "Then why don't you leave?" They say, "For the sake of the children." That has been something which is always bandied around. It's for the sake of the children. And so when these children leave, then everything just breaks down.
Yeah.
And I think that is the core the issue
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But when I feel when the bonding is really fair, nothing external, nothing external can really rupture it. And so it's all the basis, the structure there of the bonding. And I don't see how any firm relationship, any firm bonding can just give way when the children leave. No, because it's there, they came, and then they leave. So why do you have to rupture the whole setting?
Yeah.
So it depends on how firm the bonding.
Right.
the bonding
So a
is.
firm bond, you know, even as a couple, before children,
Yes,
through children,
yes.
was going to help you to stay together after children.
Exactly so.
Yeah.
Exactly so.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I think at some point, you know, this conversation around emptiness, I think you've already talked about you developing a strong relationship before. Is there anything else you can advise for parents, families to be able to cope better with emptiness syndrome?
Actually, parents should prepare for the emptiness syndrome.
Okay.
Because I remember when we were in secondary school, each time we came on Lombard and we were going back to school, my mother would say, one day, when you go, you are not coming back. And we thought, oh, it's so far away. But my mother was already thinking about when we had left home.
Yeah.
So that's what parents should do. And you prepare your children too. Children should be brought up in such a way that they also will feel comfortable leaving home. Otherwise, they're stuck on you and you wouldn't know what to do with them. And if they are, say, 35 and they are still living with you, the man or the woman is a complete person with his or her job and so on. So you, the parent, cannot treat them like when they were teenagers, for example. So both of you should be prepared that one day, even if she is with you till she or he is 40 years, they will go. So prepare yourself. In fact, it's been said that women are the ones who suffer emptiness syndrome most for obvious reasons. The children are closer to the mother. And unfortunately, some mothers completely ignore their husbands. Sometimes it's their fault, sometimes the husband's fault. If you have a husband who comes home when the children are already sleeping, and when the children wake up, he's still sleeping, and on Saturday when they can be together, he's gone playing tennis or golf, there's no relationship between the children and the father, and the mother and the father. So she is also used to him not being around.
Right, right.
So you ask my husband the reason for this late divorce. They have both gone through it for so long. So you can imagine a woman saying, if God is going to give me an additional 5 years, 15, 20 years, let me have my peace. I don't have to tolerate this man. Or the man can say, I cannot tolerate this woman any longer, because the children was like the cement that brought it together. The cement is gone, the structure will break down.
Sure. Thank you so much. Mrs. Lamptey, rounding up the conversation around emptiness syndrome, is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything we haven't discussed? It's your reality.
Yes, dealing with it and also preventing it.
Okay.
Dealing with it, both of you should be busy doing something, and then you have to set a communication schedule between you and your children. We do not want a situation where the mother calls the children almost every day, every other day, to the exclusion of their families also. And then you yourself should set new goals. And then why not? You just rekindle the romance, things that you used to do before.
Yeah.
Some names you used to call each other when you are young. Start
Go
calling
back to it.
those names. That's dealing with them. And then be happy about the fact that your children are going to have an independent life, and be happy for them.
Yeah.
And then you, to prevent it, you should prepare for it. Like I was saying, you assure yourself that they will go, and let the children also know that they will also go. And then have interest apart from your children. Some people, especially mothers, literally live around their children. That's not good enough.
Yeah.
So you can prevent the sorrow and the loneliness of the emptiness syndrome if you do these things. Invest in your marriage, travel, and do things that will make you bond together with your spouse. You see? And so in that way, your children also learn to be independent.
Yeah.
It is not good for a parent to make the children so dependent upon them that the empty of the nest becomes a wrenching in your heart, in your soul, in your body. It's not good enough. So you can prevent it, and there are ways of also dealing with it.
Yeah.
But it will come.
Sure. But Mrs. Lamptey, would you say that there are some parents that hold on, longer than they should, out of the fear of an emptiness syndrome?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And mothers are more guilty, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So sometimes when a daughter is going to get married, they give you the impression that, oh, you can come to me for whatever. So the daughter also comes to mommy for whatever. And of course, there are mothers who hold on to their sons. That's been the worst situation. So the we joke about guns. The guns will say, "Me and Maje." The man will go, "Me and Maje," and then he will come home already eating. It's because the mother is holding on to him and saying, "Eat my food."
Yeah.
So he will eat and get full. So mothers are more guilty holding on to their children, both male and female.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if a mother holds on to his son, the wife is in trouble.
Yeah. You know, in all your conversations so far, a lot of it had been centered around a situation where it's in marriage. Okay. What about emptiness that is being brought on by, say, a child who's old enough, you know, but hasn't yet married, but they are leaving home on the male end or on the female end? You know, culturally in Ghana, it's not popular, but they happen. You know, but sometimes the child is sincerely ready. They are old enough. They are older than the average who even leaves home in marriage anyway. And then it's almost like there's every reason to hold the child back. You are not ready. You are not. But they are, and it's just out of fear, you know, of the emptiness syndrome. Almost like it wasn't my time to be empty, and you are forcing the time to happen. You know, we have situations like that.
Oh yes, I mean you can have an emptiness at the age of 52, 53.
Okay.
You are still working.
Yeah.
But your child is probably going to school outside your country.
Yeah.
So she's ready to go.
Yeah.
And in Ghana, if you send your child to university abroad at the age of 18, you have an emptiness.
Yeah.
But you are young and the child is also young. But if you go to university abroad, he is mature enough to be on his own. So it does happen.
Yeah.
That the emptiness does not necessarily mean the children are going to get married.
Yeah.
In fact, for us, for example, she left home to go to school abroad.
Okay.
And she didn't marry until a couple of years later.
Okay.
So it's not always...
So she left home and never came back, really?
Pardon me?
Did she leave home and never come back?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the beginning of the going.
Of leaving, yes.
Yes, it happens.
Yeah. And what about other situations? You know, Dr. Ayongo, she's widowed. It means that if it happens that her children go and she's alone, you know, we have widowed mothers who are having to watch their children grow and leave home. You know, what happens? What happens when I'm a single? Because, you know, in a lot of what we've talked about, there's still a partnership with a husband and a wife. So let's find ourselves again. What about there's a widowed partner? So it's just a wife or it's just a husband dealing with this emptiness in.
It is more painful, obviously.
Yeah.
It is more painful because I imagine that Ayongo is now very close to the children.
Yes.
And you see, when the children go, she's alone.
Yes.
Completely alone.
Yes.
Whereas a married couple, at least they have each other. If they had bonded before, they have each other. So obviously the emptiness is very difficult for a single parent.
Yeah. But nonetheless, it happens.
Oh, it does happen.
It's a natural life, part of the life cycle,
Yes,
the doctors
right.
will say. Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Lamptey, are there any last thoughts you have on the emptiness syndrome?
Yeah, it's a reality. It's a reality which we have to face. And we have to prepare for it. And the only way to prepare for it is to bond firmly. And if we are Christians, the Christians that we have to make sure that we have taught our children the right way to cope with life, either we take the Christian way to cope with life, and then they will in turn reassure us of their safety, about the closeness of God in the whole scheme of things and all. So, well, it's there. We just have to conscientize ourselves and to psych up to meet it.
Yeah. So in totality, the foundations, you know, the foundations of how you've handled your relationship, how you've raised your children, all those eventually help in you letting go and then you dealing with the emptiness syndrome better.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
In a way, we have been lucky we can reinvest our feelings in our grandchildren.
Yes.
They're also close to us.
Yeah.
They see how the mother comes in so close to us.
Yeah.
And they also take it up from there.
Yeah. I mean, when grandchildren come in the picture, even we don't care about the children anymore. They don't. I hear people asking about my nephews more than they ask of me when they talk to my mother. It's like it's always the children, but they are not talking about me. They are talking about the grandchildren. So
Not only competes with her children.
there we go.
For our attention.
Yes, because
when she comes home, she tells them, "This is my parental home." So I said, "But what about the other? Mama, that one is my marital home." So she tells the children that they are my parents. I come before you. So she draws the line.
She draws the line. As for
One-
my nephews, they don't understand that that's my mom. But hey, we'll take it like that. The grandchildren, they take over. Great. I think part of our conversation, we said we were going to talk about miscarriages as well. And a lot of these topics we have here are sent in by our membership. And so we're trying to see how best we can answer these questions based on our experience. But I also know we're doctors. There are some doctors on the panel as well. So any contribution you can make here would like. Dr. Ayongo, I think at the end of at the beginning we did speak, and you said you had 5 miscarriages. What are those? What were those like? What was the sequence? How did it happen?
Okay, so I had the first 3 before I had my first child,
Okay.
and then the 4th one in between the 2 children, and then one after the last.
Do you think that there was anything about you genetically, or something you did, or do you find yourself? Was there any time you found yourself looking at an internal reason in terms of you as a person?
Yes, and because of that, I mean, I had to see a doctor, investigations done, and I mean, they didn't really find anything.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting. We had a question, we had a question from a member that is asking whether miscarriages are a test of faith. It's interesting. When I read the question, it took me right back to John 9:2, where the disciples asked Jesus, "Rabbi, this, who caused this situation for this man? Why was he born blind? Is it because of something he did or his parents did? It's a human thing to ask, really. Why did this happen to me? Why does this happen to me? And a member is asking, do you think that miscarriages are a test of faith?
this question is a bit.
It's a tough question.
It's a
It's
tough
personal.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think that God will bring. I mean, whatever God does is good.
Exactly.
I don't think God will bring something bad your way.
Yeah.
But what I know is that He's going to strengthen you and help you through,
Mm-hmm.
and then bring some form of solution at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, because you're trying to say that God brought it onto you
Yeah.
to test you. I don't.
You don't believe in that. That's good. Okay.
That is my
There's another question here. Someone says, I keep thinking that the miscarriage I experienced was my fault due to the decisions I took regarding my lifestyle at the time, that it could have been prevented. How do I move past this? I think 5 miscarriages, that's tough. You've had children in between, but I'm sure there's no time that you don't think, what you've lost, what it could have been. Was this something I did? How did you move on? Because you had 2, right?
I had
And
3
you had
before
3 before your first
the
child.
first,
So there was some moving on that you had to do from that. How did you handle that?
Okay, so after the 3, what I know happened was I was seeking both, medical, and of course I was praying
Yes.
about it as well. And I had a lot of prayer support.
Okay.
I mean, at that time, there's no prayer support that people had with me. I mean, came home to pray with me. People gave me books to read. And I think for me, that opportunity, that brought me closer to God. That experience I had brought me closer to God, brought me trusting Him more. It increased my faith in Him.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it increased it to the point where even though, I mean, I at a point they had to put me on some medications to try
Yeah.
to see whether things are going to be better. Yes, I did take them, but as my faith grew, I mean, I'm a medical doctor, so I'm speaking from an informed position. As my faith grew, I remember one day decided I'm not going to take this thing again. It's enough, because it makes you feel bad.
Okay.
I'm going to trust God. And I did that. And around that time was when I had my first.
Wow. God always shows up, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He does.
He does. To say you've had multiple miscarriages is to put it lightly. 5. You know, how does a family, you know, there's one thing with you dealing with it. How does a family, you had a husband at the time, how did you deal with it?
And I must say, he didn't talk much about. He thought, well, I mean, it's come and gone. I mean, you get another one.
Yeah.
So he never, like, sort of, you know, had a thought that maybe it was you or it's my fault or is
Okay.
anybody know.
Okay.
That
Okay.
never.
It was everybody's loss, but it was
everybody's
everybody's
loss,
faith
and
as
we
well.
know that. I mean, it will come again.
happen.
We'll get another
Great,
one.
great. Do you think, was there anything in God's word, was there any scripture that you sort of held on to more and more around the you know, when you were going through?
Yeah, one of them was in Exodus, I think, where it talks about none shall miscarry or be barren. It was one of the verses that I kept on declaring to myself that despite the fact that I saw it happening, I kept on declaring to myself. And I must confess, between the first two, the one that occurred, I had a lot of fear. I don't know where that fear came from. And I had a lot of fear that it was going to happen. That's why we should be careful what, I mean, we fear.
What you
Why the
process
Bible always talks to us about fear. Because I had a lot of fear. It was very gripping. And then that happened.
And then it happened.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, these are some of the things that we need
To look at. Sure.
be watchful.
I mean, I think there's a thing to also be said about not having support, you know, as a family, as you and your husband, for instance, even in dealing with emptiness, as the Dr. Lamptey and his wife had said, you know, there's something about your collaboration that helps you to move through things. So I would say that's a very big part of moving on.
Yes, and
Because
also my
if you're-
parents too were very supportive.
Okay. So the support system in all
Generally was
also helps,
helpful.
because there are also people who miscarried and don't even want to try again because, you know, they can't deal.
Exactly.
The question of, and it's not something, I think Christians are different. There are always different sects of Christians. You know, you can find a Christian who believes in something and the other that doesn't believe in it. Hopefully you both believe in the Bible, you know. Adoption. Someone is asking, when would be a good time to decide that, you know what, we need to adopt? Was there any time within all these miscarriages you thought to yourself, maybe I'm going to have to adopt a child?
No, I didn't. What I thought to myself and what my doctor suggested once was an IVF,
Okay.
in vitro fertilization. But I didn't get to that
That's
point of thinking
But
adoption.
as a medical doctor, you wouldn't have taken it off the table if you had to. Was it something you would have been open to if it came to that?
Sure, I would.
Yeah. I think unfortunately, you know, Christians have taken a certain stance. You know, I think we always debate faith and, you know, why am I trying this if I have faith? But I also like to see it as the same God has given wisdom to doctors. The same God has given opportunity to people to discover. You know, so why do we want to look at that as not God? You know, they say everything is God. The wind that we're contending with today is God. You know, he's in everything. So I think some of these conversations come up when people begin to look at it like, you know, I don't have faith. And it's interesting, even in today's COVID situation, a lot of people who are running away from vaccination and they're going to church, but then their pastor is vaccinated. You know, it's an interesting situation. You know, I think there were also people who feel like you know, having multiple miscarriages is the end. You know, I think your experience is near perfect in terms of giving hope, because you had before, you've had children, and then you've even had after that. You know, obviously how you felt about the miscarriages before your children were different from how you felt after.
Yes,
You
two
know.
different. Because the before you'll be wondering, so will I ever be able to sustain a pregnancy? Will I ever be able to have children of my own? But once you've had one, you know that once this one kid, by God's grace, I mean this is gone, but another one would come. So the one that happened in between my two children, I remember it happened at home. And I quite remember when it happened, I was torn between, I mean, getting sad, crying, and then, I mean, just thanking God for the situation, because I just remembered I have to thank God in everything. And I asked myself, how do you thank God in a situation like this, in this kind of pain, that you just thought, oh, you've gotten over this thing and it will not come again, and then it came again. And I remember hearing a still small voice telling me that still thank God and still praise Him. So in the midst of it, in my room, as I was praising God, I heard it very clearly that in a year's time, I'm going to surprise you. And this happened around about February or so, thereabouts of that year. That December was when my son was
Oh wow.
my second child.
Great, great. I mean, I guess
So some of the things look like weird or like
impossible.
impossible.
Yeah.
Can I really do? But when we
Yeah.
obey,
Yeah,
God
yeah,
comes.
yeah. They say if he's done it before,
Yeah.
he'll do it again. And I think there's this thing that unfortunately as Christians we tend to forget. I once heard a sermon that said, "Don't forget to remember," and
That's a good one.
and
That's
it's
a good
almost
one.
like our memories of how God, the hymn writer will say, his help in time past forbids me to
Forbids me
think
to
he will
think
leave
he
me
will
at
leave me at
last.
last.
Travel to sing.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it's almost like once you remember that, oh, he's done it before, surely he can do it again.
Yes.
Yeah. That's very encouraging. On a more medical perspective, I know you are a doctor in family health, but perhaps you could help answer some of these questions from our members. Someone wants to know if age of the couple has anything to do with miscarriages. Is there some sort of relationship?
What that can cause is, as you increase in age, you may have chromosomal abnormalities, and that is one of the causes of miscarriages.
Okay.
So that's in that sense. Okay. But whatever the situation is, you need to see your doctor,
Yeah.
have a discussion, an examination, history taken, an examination, and investigations before you can
Get to these
get to these
conclusions.
decisions.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, questions around how stress, stress and other factors that contribute, all of this would come up from when they understand.
Exactly, when you understand
why.
your situation as a person, and then you can conclude and say that maybe stress caused yours, or chromosomal, or maybe weakening around the os or the opening of the womb may have
All
caused
of
it.
that. Okay. The interesting question here, and it's a big question because it's short, but it's a big question. I think that what do we do to prevent miscarriages? It's one of the questions we have from our members.
So this is a very broad one, because prevention can span a lot of, because there are different things or conditions that can cause it. So the chromosomal abnormalities, you cannot. How are you going to prevent it? You will not know. Outside or elsewhere, the moment you conceive, they may be able to decipher or tell whether there's something like that happening in the womb. But here, you will not be able to do it. So that one may not be able to prevent it. But for probably people who cause maybe illicit abortions or instrumental, procedures to remove babies and things, those cannot cause a weakening of the cervix.
Okay.
And that can end you up in miscarriages later in life.
Okay.
Those are some of the things that you can
Do to prevent.
prevent.
Okay. So
But
it's a broad
otherwise,
spectrum,
it's a very
and
broad
why you are
spectrum.
miscarriaging can inform how you can prevent
Exactly.
it. Okay. Thank you. I mean, I think on the topic of miscarriage, at the end of the day, there's always, somebody said the biggest risk of being alive is dying. You sort of, once you are alive, that's the one factor to die, right? And so I think when it comes to things like miscarriages, everybody wants to know what it is, but I guess it's always better to get your doctor's perspective,
Exactly.
to help you
To
through
help
it.
you to
But it's
prevent
not the
it.
end.
No, it's not. It's certainly not the end.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, having an open conversation about loss in the context of family, I think miscarriage is something that unfortunately is in our society sometimes becomes a very silent loss, silent struggle between families, between married couples, between women. So it's interesting that we have questions, and I'm glad we've been able to touch on some of them.
And I just want to chip in here that sometimes we sort of, everybody has their different temperaments.
Yes.
And what they can take. Because I know people who have had one miscarriage and they've gone into depression.
Okay.
And depression that has lasted for them till old age. So I think we should have ways of counseling, encouraging people that it could be well or it can get better. Even amongst the medical fraternity, you get miscarriage, okay, give you the medications to go, but there should be some form of counseling for some people who may need it to be able to come up from it.
Yeah, I mean, miscarriage is traumatic,
Yes,
right?
it
It's
is.
a trauma situation that has to be handled. Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much. I think there's one question, but I think it's probably broader than miscarriage. I'll throw it to the Lampteys first, Dr. and Mrs. Lamptey. How would you say you've learned to wait on God? You waited 4 years before you had your first child, your first and only child. What was it like to wait on God, or how did you wait?
Would you like to start? Yes. We, apart from us praying, we had friends who prayed with us and for us, and she mentioned the supporting system. One time I had a false pregnancy, 3 months, no period, and apparently I wasn't pregnant. It was the stress and anxiety which caused it. Maybe Ayongo can explain that kind of thing. So when my period finally came, I really cried. And I literally performed, hitting myself on the ground, crying, and he stood there, looked at me. When I finished, then he asked me whether it was him I was in love with or the baby that I don't know. So first and foremost, he supported, and then he went to tell his mother to talk to me. And that's very rare, because in African situation, when your wife is not having a child, the last person you want to talk to is her mother-in-law. And I remember, and I give praise to God for such a mother-in-law. She said, Gloria, since you came to this house, in other words, is somebody
tasking you
for a child, and it's stuck in my mind. So that's when I said, trust God. And she said, you have a child, we love you. You don't have a child, we love you. Then my mother said, Ayele, if you don't have a child, you won't be the first, and you won't certainly be the last. So stop worrying. And all those things increase your faith, because you know that there are people who are with you. And so you learn to live with God. So after that bad first pregnancy experience, Peter and I decided that, look, we've done everything we can. Let's leave it to God. And Sharon, believe it or not, that month that we decided to relax, that's when I got pregnant, and I was not even aware I was pregnant. So when you leave it to God, God does it. It increases your faith, and you said, let God, you leave it and let God do it. So for us, we left everything in the hands of God, and God did it.
God did it. He always comes through. I said that. Mr. Lamptey, anything you want to add?
You are not free.
She said it all.
She said it all.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and one small thing. After waiting for all those years and so on, I had a premature baby.
Oh, wow.
And he was not in the country.
Wow.
So I leave it to the two of you to imagine what happened and what the faith does, and say, God, if you are giving me, just give me proper. But why because it was another extremely difficult period for me, especially with him not around. But your faith is still there, because you pray to God. My mother said I should stop crying, because I cried a lot. She said, you prayed to God all these years to give you a child.
And there's
He's
a
giving you
child.
a child. And out of some small difficulty too, you are complaining. Stop complaining. It's not good, and it is not being thankful to God for what He's done. Because the most difficult thing is, I've had a child. Premature baby. So what?
Still a baby.
Still a baby. and I will look at her hands and count all the fingers, and they were there.
Everything is there.
And the toes, it was there. So it increases your faith a lot. That he who starts it will finish it. He started it. He will finish it.
Amen. Amen to that. Amen to that. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, Dr. Ayongo, what would you like to say as our closing remarks to this conversation we've had, even around the miscarriages as well?
Okay, so what I would like to say is that I side with Mrs. Lamptey 100%. Trust God. Whatever situation, miscarriage, whatever situation you're going through, give it to Him and trust Him, and He will come through. Never give up. Just trust God.
So, in all our learnings, we can say today we've learned that how to wait on God is to trust Him, and to be thankful also.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Stay with us. We are going to move on to our conversation specifically around loss itself. Dr. Ayongo will stay with me. Dr. and Mrs. Lamptey would leave us now, but we'll be joined again by another member of our panel to take on the next part of the conversation. Thank you. Okay, so we are back on our conversations around loss. We're still in Family Month with Rich Church taking our congregation and friends through Family Month. And we started our conversations around loss on emptiness syndrome and miscarriages. And now we're going to get a bit more, a different side of loss. I still have Dr. Ayongo here, and then now we are joined by Dr. Akua Gyimah-Asante, and then we still have Juliana online with us. Juliana Attoh is still online with us. I would have wanted to introduce them again, but I think I would allow them to tell us why they think they've been invited to a conversation around loss. Dr. Ayongo, why do you think the Family Month Committee have asked you to join us again for this conversation around loss?
Yeah, I believe because I lost my husband a year ago.
Okay. You lost your husband a year ago. Wow. How old are you, if you don't mind us asking?
45.
Okay. So you have how many children? Two. You said you had 2 children. Okay. Dr. Gyimah-Asante, how about you?
So I lost my husband barely a year ago.
Okay.
And 3.5 months after the death of my husband, I lost my dad as well. I have 5 children. I
Wow.
lost my husband when I was 44.
Okay. All right. And Juliana Attoh is online with us. Juliana, how about you? What loss have you suffered? Why do you think you are part of this panel today?
I lost my husband 2 years ago, almost 2 years now. And then we've been married for 8 years. And after losing him, maybe I thought of sharing my experience.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for letting us know, and thank you all for joining us. So today we've had questions come in from our congregation, and we are hoping that through those questions we'll also be able to share your experience and how you are managing things. Interestingly, you are both a year away, or almost a year for you, Dr. Gyimah-Asante, from when you lost your spouse. How you all have children. I know Dr. Ayongo has 2 children who are young. They are not. Are there any teenagers among the 2? No. You know. How did you communicate loss to young children? How did you communicate loss to your children?
Okay, so for me, I have an uncle who is a psychologist. So that day, the morning of the next morning after that happened, he came in, and then together with us, we told them about the loss.
Okay. Was there any particular step you had to take? Had they seen you already mourning?
They had noticed the house being very active with people coming in and out. So they were already asking that, why is everybody here? I mean, where is their dad?
Having a psychologist with you to break the news, you know, being in that situation, did you feel like you would have done it worse, or it would have been different from how you would have told them?
I wouldn't have known how I would have told them.
Yeah. You were barely telling yourself, really. Wow. How about you, Dr. Gyimah-Asante?
So on the day that it happened, when things like that happen, you are the last to know, because I remember somebody called and asked me where my husband was. I told him he was not well and he had been admitted. But at hindsight, now I know that she knew that was why she was calling, but I didn't know. So after the news had been broken to me, I told them there was no way I could tell my children. So my mother and my sister-in-law took up down with me, and they told them what had happened. And later on, I went and had them. For me, then dealing with their reaction was what actually hit me, because I didn't break the news to them, but I had to deal with their reaction. I had to deal with their emotions. My youngest son was 11 at that time. After a while, he left the house. Where he was going, we didn't know. So then I had to ask my cousin to follow me. That was the way he reacted after. I mean, everybody cried, etc. At a point, he was very angry because I remember during the week or something, I told him to go and pray. He told me that, Mommy, I'm not going to pray anymore. I have been praying for the mass for the past month.
Oh.
God didn't answer my prayer. So that was his reaction. And those reactions were what I had to deal with. I had to deal with questions. One of my children, the youngest, he reads a lot. She reads a lot, and she would ask me questions upon questions. And finding the answers was my difficulty.
Yeah.
I had to explain to them what death was. I mean, she had Googled, so she knew what death was. I had to explain to them.
How old is she? How old is the young?
She's 11 now.
Okay.
Yeah, but she was 10.
10. Okay.
I had to explain to her some of the traditional demands, events that had to occur, the 1 week celebration, the funeral, even tribute. I had to explain to them what a tribute was and what they had to write. So dealing with their reaction, their responses was quite difficult, but somehow I navigated.
It's pretty much like Dr. Ayongo said, it's not something you would have been able to tell them yourself.
No.
And so the support of family helped.
Yes.
Were you weren't there when they were being told?
No, I wasn't there,
Okay.
but I went there later on.
Okay.
But at a point, I took them to get a counselor
Yeah.
because I realized that the questions were too many.
Yeah.
And the school offered to give us some counselors.
Okay.
So they counseled them. But after a few sessions, they told me they were okay. They didn't want to stop.
Stop. Okay.
But I felt the need for a counselor.
Yeah. Wow. You said 5 children. So you talked about the first one. You talked about the last one, who was 10 at the time. How old were the rest of the children?
Okay, so my first child is grown. He's old.
Okay.
He's 26.
Okay.
And the second is 15 now. So
Okay.
it's 15, 12, and then 11 now.
Okay.
The last I set of twins.
Okay. Wow. Okay. You were left with 5 children. What was that like on you? How did you handle them?
So I mean, it's more of the fear of the unknown. You don't know what to expect. You don't know how to handle them. But I think that with time, with the support of family, they now understand the reality, because sometimes we are in denial. We are in denial. And we've grown to be closer. We've grown to do things together. And we share a lot of ideas. Some of them, because they would ask,
Yeah.
Mommy, what happens to us? Are we going to the same school? Are we doing? They ask a lot of questions. So I think with time, I've grown to be very frank with them and explain to them in simple terms some of the things that they need to know.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that they have come to realize is their relationship with God. Because now they know that, I mean, they need to have a relationship with God. I mean, He alone can give you the comfort that you need, the peace of mind, the strength that you need. And I think that has helped to a large extent.
Wow. Okay. Juliana online. I don't know, Juliana. Tell us how did you break it? How did you break your loss to your children? You know, at the time, what were things like? What was that experience like for you?
No, we didn't have children after 8 years.
Wow, thank you. That's interesting. I mean, I think there's one thing that Dr. Gyimah-Asante has mentioned, which is fear. You know, and interestingly, we had some questions from our members about fear. You know, when it comes to loss. Somebody's question was, "I'm frightened of being alone. How do I deal with that as I grieve?" You know, it's interesting how the person has separated the fear from the grief. It's like I'm dealing with the sadness, and I'm afraid as well. What was it like? The burden of having 5 children. You mentioned fear. How do you think you've handled the fear? One, yes, you said you sort of brought all the children in on it so that they understand the condition. But as a person, as an individual, as a widow, as somebody who's lost her partner, how have you dealt with fear?
So fear is very, very real. The fear of the unknown, the fear of loneliness. You really don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
But we take encouragement in the Word of God. The Word of God says that we should encourage ourselves. And the Word of God tells us that God hasn't given us a spirit of fear. He has given us power, strength, love, and a sound mind. So the Word of God tells us that He's there. He also tells us that He's the father of the fatherless and the husband of the widow. So if you look at what God says, you can encourage yourself in the Word of God. And that has been very, very helpful. And of course, God raises people to support us. God raises men to encourage us. And one thing I have found very helpful is surrounding myself with men and women of God, with friends who know the Lord, who can also encourage you. That has been very, very helpful.
Thank you. Dr. Ayongo, how about you? Has there been any fear, 1 year down the line, from day one, from the day it happened till today, has there been fear?
Yes, the word fears, but like you mentioned, prayer, and then constantly you had the support. You could tell that people would send you messages, verses of scripture. Some would call you, pray with you on the line, and our own Reverend, calls, praise. We had all those kinds of supports.
Yeah.
And then with the Word of God as well, telling ourselves that God will never leave us nor forsake us. Those are the things, or those are the strengths that have carried us to this far.
Yeah. Juliana, how about you? What has fear been like for you? Has there been any fear? What has it been like for you?
For the fear, because my mom, my aunties, everybody was there for me, I felt okay. Like there were too many people. God brought in people at every point, at every stage. So there was no much fear. Like I felt secured around them, and there were people who could pray with me, encourage me. So when you have these people around you, it helps drive fear away with people who can give you the word of God, help you with it.
All right, thank you, Juliana. I think one of the things that people have said about in dealing with their loss, is they've does keeping a journal help? Do you journal? Is that something you have? You have children on you as well, but is that something you have time to do? It's been what, a year for you. Have you been journaling, or how else are you dealing?
Yes, I have been writing. I have a book that I write.
That you write down.
I write things that I'm thankful for, things that happen, things that I mean within the period prayed about, God came through. I write them down.
How about you, Doctor?
I also keep a journal, but I don't write as often as I would have loved to.
Okay.
But at least I keep a journal and I put in things that encourages me. I write my testimonies, I write my miracles. And it's helpful, especially if you want to write a book later on to encourage people through your loss. So I find it helpful keeping a journal. It's just that you shouldn't dwell so much on the negative things, because the memory of negative things, of course.
Yeah, it becomes your book of doom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would rather put in miracles, testimonies, things that you can say in future to testify of the goodness of the Lord.
Yeah. Juliana, how about you? Are you journaling? Is there anything else you are doing to help, through?
For me, when it happened, I realized I was idle, so I had to go back to school. So currently I'm in school, I'm doing my PhD, and it has really occupied me so much. Like now I don't have to set all my time thinking, and I've been attending monetary um supervisory visits at different facilities too. So I hardly stay at one place.
Okay, thank you, Juliana. There's one question I have here where someone says, "How am I supposed to feel when I have something to share and my spouse is not there?" Dr. Ayongo, this is somebody you were living your life with. Obviously, you are sharing your ideas, your ideals, your situations. What's it like now? There's no one there to talk to. What happens in that moment?
Okay, so I like what Akua mentioned about the children. I talk to them a lot. We
Okay.
take a lot of decisions together.
Okay.
It will amaze you. The decision may look like it's adultish,
Yeah.
but the kind of ideas that they will give you,
Yeah. How old are your
it's
children?
12 and 9.
12 and 9.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So we share a lot of ideas, and I have godly friends. And I thank God for. I had them through the miscarriages. Some have lingered on so long. Very good friends. Some older, some my age, some younger, and depending on who I have the leading to run something by, I do.
You do that.
I
Yeah.
do that
Yeah.
as well.
So that's support system.
So there's
Yeah.
some
So
support
yes,
system.
the usual suspect is not there.
Exactly.
But then there's support
But
from
then others,
elsewhere.
yes.
Great. Dr. Gyimah-Asante, how about you? How would you say, yes, 5 children, definitely. There are things even about the children that you would discuss with your husband. What's that like now?
I think in those moments you really feel the loneliness because there are things that you would have shared with your husband easily. I mean, just pick a call him, this is the situation, what do you do? Advise me. So that is the reality. But like I said, God gives us some support. So for me, my mom and my sister have been of good help. And if I need to share anything, I try to
Talk to them.
involve them. My son, my biggest son, older son, has been of great help too. I share everything with him now. I mean, he has now taken up the role of a father, a brother, a son.
Yeah. He's what, 26 now?
Yes.
Okay.
So he helps with some of the decisions that we have to take. And then, of course, I also have very good friends, pastors, who advise me on what to do and what not to do. So I think that these people help to some extent.
Great. There's always that support that comes, right? We are the hands and feet of the Lord, and I think it shows, especially when you're dealing with loss. I think it's easy to take people for granted when you haven't really needed people,
Yes.
and then you appreciate your community. I was saying earlier to Dr. Ayongo, it's something you really get from Rich Church, there's community. And there are people you don't know who know you because you've been coming to church here. You have the visitation group, they come to your house, they knock on your door often. And I think when we deal with loss, yes, you're alone, but in a Christian sense, you still feel that fellowship of the brethren at the time, which is very good. I'll ask Juliana as well. Juliana, how about you? What has it been like when there's something you wanted to talk to your partner about, your spouse about, he's not there? How are you dealing with that now?
My best friends, and we shared everything. So there are times when I want to share something, he's not around. All I do is I start crying. I feel so sad because I'm very confidential. I don't talk to people. I don't like to open up. I don't like opening up to people. So it made me cry a lot. It's sad. Yeah, and you really feel the loss during those moments.
Okay, thank you, Juliana. I think there's one question I would like to ask, and I think Dr. Gyimah-Asante, you mentioned that your husband was not well, right? He was unwell, so he was in hospital. What? Okay, so let me put it this way, and I want to read it just like the person has asked. After my partner passed away, I became very fearful of being ill and having no one to take care of me. How can I deal with that fear? I think that situation of understanding, you're a doctor, so human beings, we even if you wouldn't die by an accident, naturally, it's something that's going to happen anyway. But you've seen a spouse get sick, pass. For you, what does that say to you? Does that make you fearful of, an illness that can take your life? What has that situation brought about for you?
Yes. There are moments that we are fearful of, don't know what can happen, etc.
Yeah.
Sickness or illness. But that is when you also have to encourage yourself in the Lord, because you cannot live in fear always. And that is, it's not something God gives to you. It's fear. It's not from God. He doesn't give us fear. So during those moments, you try and encourage yourself in the Word of God and tell yourself that God has you. God will take care of you. So those moments come, yes. Every now and then you experience those moments. But once you encourage yourself in the Lord, you move on.
I think the idea of encouraging yourself in the Lord, the other day someone said sometimes we speak Christianese, and it's funny because I think sometimes we don't do it intentionally, it's just our walk of faith has put us in a position that we understand some of these things, But I think also when you are facing loss, especially when it's just happened, any even trauma, when it's just happened, as a doctor, like there are some things that people have learned that they forget in that moment. It's like you are blank, you are numb, you've heard the worst news of your life. How does a person what are things that the person can practically hold on to? Is there anything that you say that, look, even without opening my Bible, this is helpful for me?
Okay. I can only share what I experienced.
Sure, please do.
And for me, there were some key people who took up the role of actually calling regularly, and it was just for prayer.
Okay.
They would just call, they say, we are praying, let's learn this particular verse, I am here for you, let's pray, or I'm on the line, I'm praying, you can pray or not, join me or not, but this is what I'm doing. Others send messages, we are praying with you. So for me, for a couple of days, I couldn't open the Bible, I couldn't remember some of the verses, I couldn't pray myself, I couldn't sleep. It was just like you described, it was just numb. But after about a couple of days, I realized that some days when it happens like that, then you sort of feel like there's a wind, there's something carrying you, and then your spirit lifts up. So then later on, I looked and I realized that probably at that time somebody was mentioning my name to the Lord, or somebody was crying out. So for you yourself, you really can't do. I couldn't do much. But the calls would come, and there were particular calls that when they came, I would pick, because that was what that would do for me. So those were the ones that got me out a little bit, and then gradually we came through.
Good. The thing about grieving, is that it's one of those things. It's inevitable, right? It's death. It's like death. Once you're alive, you will die. I think it's a settled thing. It's the when and the how that is, the difference comes in. That's when a lot of the anxiety comes in. That's where we are all different. But where we are all the same is that we will all die. And so grief is something that we're all going to experience at one point or the other. A preacher said that if Jesus did it, then it had to be done. This is in reference to John 11:35. Jesus wept. He said if Jesus did it, then it had to be done. And so we can agree that, look, we're all going to grieve at some point. For something, for someone, it's going to happen. Now, somebody asked an interesting question, and I mean, for me, I'm looking at it as a general grief question, because the truth is, grief is inevitable. That would have been my answer, but I wanted your opinion. Someone says that my husband and I had a troubled marriage. Why am I still grieving so much? And I look at it like, once you have a relationship with a person, you will grieve, right? If you had an enemy, someone who was always opposing you about something, if you heard that they had passed, there's a sentiment of grief you may have, right? because at the end of the day, we know that grief is that loss you feel, the sadness you feel for a loss that you've gotten. Now, what would you say generally, in general terms speaking of, as a human being, as a wife to a man? Definitely you've had your differences in the past, but that didn't change how you grieve the loss of your husband. So even in a situation where someone says they had a troubled marriage, her partner is still gone. And so as much as, they may had an issue, there was definitely there's a connection still, I mean, what would you say has been some of the things you've grieved about your husband? It's like, yes, generally I'm sad he's not there, but there are some things that may have happened or didn't happen that you feel like, oh, if he was here, are there those things that come to mind now every now and then?
Yeah, sure. There are things that come to mind. Actually, you have to take certain decisions, or you have to, do certain things. It will come to mind that, oh, if you were here, you didn't like me to do things like this.
Yeah.
Or there was one day he didn't like buying things on the roadside. So anytime, like, you sort of mentioning that, oh, he doesn't like you buying things in traffic, that kind of thing. You should buy it from a shop where you know how it's stored well. So there were things that, yes, they'll come up. As and when.
Yeah.
But I believe that every human institution, there are differences.
Yeah.
But the fact that the person does this or that doesn't take away how you feel about that person. You may feel something about the thing, not necessarily about the person. So it's possible this person may be, you still loved your husband. Yes. The fact that you will still be grieving. It doesn't mean that the troubles, yes, you didn't like the troubles. But you will still definitely, certainly grieve about the person. But there's something they call protracted grief, which people are not encouraged to go through, because sometimes you can end up in depression and other health consequences.
Okay, what is protracted grief?
I think that goes beyond a year. Let me not. I'm not
in your opinion
very sure about the duration.
Okay.
But I know 6 months to like a year. When it goes beyond
that, then it becomes protracted.
It becomes problematic, because there's a period you are allowed
to
grieve.
after that,
you are even encouraged to do it. Beyond which it becomes unhealthy.
So there's an interesting question here, and it's interesting that you talked about protracted grief. Someone is asking, if you lose more than one person within 6 months or a year, can the grief overlap? And how do you separate your feelings so that you can go through the process in the most beneficial way? Let me throw this to Dr. Gyimah-Asante first. She mentioned that she lost her husband and then she lost her father. Had you finished even grieving your husband before you lost your father?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think that grief is a natural process. And that is how you express yourself when you lose something. So having lost two people within a short period just meant that the intensity of my grieving had increased.
Right.
I'm not able to separate my feelings per se. I was sad and I became even more sad when my daddy died, because I thought now he was the person.
So you are left with him, right?
So it was a very big blow. But after a few weeks, etc., that I questioned God. I knew that God was telling me that it was time for my father to go to. He had been ill for so long. Just imagine going to the hospital or to the laboratory every other week and getting anything for 10 good years.
Wow.
That is how long my father had his illness. So at that time, I knew that God had even answered his prayer. I remember a week or two before, he called me and told me that he was leaving. This was something he had said over and over again, so it didn't make a mark or anything. But on hindsight, I knew that he knew it was time. And God's way of answering his prayer was to call him to himself. And so that's, knowledge somehow consoles me. But it doesn't make my grieving
any less.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I take consolation in that fact.
Yeah.
So separating my feelings, I don't think I could separate my. I was sad.
Yeah. How long? What was the period between losing your husband and then you losing your father?
It's 3.5 months.
3.5 months.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess the question then is, or the follow up would be that it suggests that there's no day or there's no situation that you may lose two people and not be able to grieve them both, but it's not like you are separating your grief either way.
No.
Yeah. Everybody would grieve everyone, but
Yeah.
you can't quite separate it. You know, I was telling Dr. Ayongo earlier. It's interesting, after you've suffered loss and you know it's a spouse, a parent, almost every funeral is a trigger. You know, you are sitting at a funeral of, you know, somebody who used to work with someone, and next thing you know, you are crying like it's
I remember a friend of mine also lost their husband.
Yeah.
And we went for the memorial service. I wept throughout as if I was.
Yeah. As if you were widowed all over again, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I had to walk out of the
Yeah.
memorial service
Yeah.
because it just brings
Memories, yeah.
So you relive it
Over and over.
time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you just have to know what to do afterwards
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
come back.
Yeah. I don't know, I would ask Juliana as well, you know, in terms of grieving, the time frame of grieving, how long have you had to grieve? You know, how would you say you've handled that grief over time? Are there any other situations you've had to grieve within that same period?
After the death of my husband, I lost our bishop, who was just like a father, within few months. And then I lost my mom within a short space. And then I lost my dad. And with the grief, it overlapped. We can't, it looks impossible for healing to take place. Sorry. It looks so impossible for healing to take place. But then you take it one at a time. Because if you put all together, this is my experience, and I still have that, I still feel it, but it's better than before. I was getting headache. I'll just collapse for no reason. I'll just be sitting and crying because anytime I think about my husband, I think about my dad, my mom, who was there with me and she was comforting me, telling me all things will be fine. And then my bishop will call me and tell me, and my pastor will call me, Julie, don't worry, we'll take care of you. And my dad will promise me that, oh, since your husband is gone, for me, I'm going to stay and make sure you are okay. And then you lose all these people within a short time. So it's really overlaps, and if you are not careful, it's going to prolong. So you make yourself available, you open up to counseling, you open up for people to help you. One thing I told myself after all these things, I told myself that I'm going to allow myself to be comforted. When people talk to me, I'm going to listen. I'm going to hear what they have for me. So it's really helped. At a point, I didn't really understand why he should go. So I always feel, I always felt the loss. But then when you come to terms with it, that the person is gone, it also helps. You try to deal with it because you wake up in the morning, you know you are not going to see the person. The person will never come back, but then the person lives in your heart and you can't get rid of that. It's there, it's something permanent that you have to work with time. But then you have to understand that the person is gone and the person is never going to come back. So when you appreciate that, you ask God to help you. It's with time that you actually see that you are healing. But immediately it's very difficult.
Okay, on the same topic of grief, I think at the end of the day we all agree that, you know, there will come a time where everyone is going to grieve, you know, and yes, we've discussed protracted grief and all, but I guess then the next thing we ask is, at what point do you move on? You know, it's interesting. Even if we go back to the Bible, we know that there are times when the same people in the Bible we look up to were they were told to move on. You know, there was a time when in 1 Samuel 16, you've mourned long enough for Saul. Saul was not dead, but you know, for Samuel, Saul was destiny for him. You know, you can say he was born to anoint Saul to be king. But now this person that you've had me anoint, that I've held his hand all this way, yes, he's done something, but you've rejected him. It's tough because he thought that was his only purpose, and Saul has been rejected. Then you also come to Joshua 1:2. Moses, my servant, is dead. This is the person who was leading the Israelites. That's a big deal. And I'm sure Joshua was also thinking those were big shoes to fill. But he was told to move on. And he had to move on and lead the same people. Very much like you. You have 5 children, you know, Dr. Gyimah-Asante. You have 2 children, Dr. Ayongo. Juliana also has her. But how do you tell yourself to move on? This is tough. What has happened is not fair. You know, it's tough. How do you move on? Dr. Ayongo.
And I think what happens is that moving on is like you never stop. You keep moving. You know, you've never stopped moving, even though you were grieved. You were still moving.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, it gets a bit easier on you, on your system, on your emotions, on your heart, on your mind.
Yeah.
It gets a bit easier on its own. But you will not tell yourself that, oh, at this point I am moving on. But you are just,
it happens without you even realizing.
And then you just know that yes, you have to be there for your children.
Yeah.
There are things to do.
Yeah.
And you just, I mean, like I always tell guys, you go to bed tired, you pray for the grace, the Lord wakes you up again the next morning. He energizes you, and then you move on.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether there's any clear-cut fine line where you say that, oh, at this point, this is it, I'm moving on.
I've tried enough, let me go.
No, but somehow the things are waiting for you. So
life waits.
You are just. I mean,
how soon were you back at work?
Within a month after the funeral, I was back at work.
Wow.
November.
Wow. Dr. Gyimah-Asante, how about you?
I think time has a way of
moving you on.
moving you on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Time has a way of bringing some form of healing to you. So with time and with added responsibilities that you didn't envisage, you realize that you have to pick up the pieces and move on. I always say I take one day at a time, because if you think too much into the future, it's mind-boggling. You cannot handle it. So you take one day at a time and ask for grace to move on. But by and large, I think time has a way of telling you that
It's time to move on.
it's time to move on.
Yeah. Juliana, how about you? What's moving on like? Have you moved on? Are you moving on?
With me, before he died, we spoke a lot, and he told me to move on. He told me he wants me to be happy, and that I should promise him I'm going to be happy. He told me I should start life and have my children. Even though he said all those things, it wasn't easy. It was just like words being spoken. It's a different thing from you doing the real thing, because he's the one you've been with all this while. But then I think after his 1 year, when we went to the graveyard, and I also felt that I told myself I was going to move on, because I felt it strongly that really I asked you to move on. What are you waiting for? But still I couldn't. So each time I tried to tell myself I'm going to move on, I'm going to move on. But now I think just having the mind that you want to move on, it's better. It's one step.
Okay, so there are some questions I got, and I think, speaking to you and hearing your experience, you are just 1 year, 1 year past the loss. So this may be difficult to answer, but perhaps we can speak around it. Someone says, why are some people able to form a close relationship with another as soon after their loss, while others have such a problem with dating? I would ask you in this way though, it's been 1 year since you lost your partner. Do you see yourself, at a time where, does it make sense to you that there's going to be a time where you can begin to, be in a different kind of relationship?
Okay, so for me, what it is that I was even discussing with you earlier, that when it happened, like immediately, you are not interested in any kind of thing. Your mind is not on anything like that. But like she rightly put it, as time goes on, your spirit or your emotions open up a little bit. It's not as if you are going to go and ask for somebody or something, but your system opens up a little bit. And you have even people, I guess, people to play a role, like passing comments your way. Like, hey, actually you are not 15. The Bible says that even in those days before 15, they should even tolerate any kind of alone thing. So you better start making up your mind. Somebody will say, I'm getting my suit ready, I'm doing this, they are on you. Receive it, but a year by this time they receive it, like
they're already giving the prophecies.
So they already so you have people coming in with some of those things, but your mind usually is so preoccupied
with what's happening.
So
you're still in the process,
that you are playing a role in, and other things that it's not like your preoccupation that you are sitting by.
It's not on your mind now. Dr. Gyimah-Asante, you have 5 children. Moving on, being with a new person and a new partner, for you it also may mean even more support. Is that something you've considered? Or you are not there yet? She's laughing. It's too soon to move on.
Yes.
Yeah. You don't see it.
It's too soon. You are preoccupied with your children, with how to take care of their education, how to make sure they are okay. It's not something that it's not a priority right now.
I have spoken to some widows. Someone told me that she had, this years after she's been widowed, but she said that she stays away from it, and even the thought of it, because she can't handle losing another spouse.
Exactly. So I remember in a conversation I had with a friend, I told the person, even the fear of
losing again, going through this again, it's impossible. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But of course, with time, like I said, God gives you the grace.
Time will, help you through. It's interesting. There are people who've been widowed, they've gotten married, widowed again. So it happens. I know people who've been widowed twice, 3 times actually. So it's a tough call. So the first time I heard that as a reason from a widow, I thought, oh come on, how does that happen? That's like lightning striking the same place twice. For me, I thought, until I met somebody who had lost her second husband, and I'm like, wow, it gave me a new perspective. Like, it's true, it's a valid fear that a widow could have, that they wouldn't want to go through again. So I get that. I think the rest of the questions, are all very detailed about moving on, about bringing children along and stuff, which we can't really cover here. But I think from how you are dealing, you're both saying you've gotten closer to your children. What do you think your children think about when they think of you? What do you think their mind is of you now, Dr. Ayongo?
I can only comment on that based on what they tell me.
What are they saying?
Which I see now, they are extremely grateful now. Any little thing you do, you get so many thank yous without even having to ask anybody, say, didn't you see that I did? Didn't you see? It just comes like that, and then sometimes you hear things like, oh, you are the best mom. They pass.
They are more delicate with you.
Yes.
Let
me just.
They are. Wow.
They are more. You can see the gratitude.
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah. How about you?
I think we've gotten closer. There's not a single day that they don't say, "Mommy, I love you."
Wow.
It comes so naturally. Even before they sleep, they will come and the girls, the boys, they have this
Being tough about it.
boyish.
Yeah, but they're asking you, how are you? What did you
Yes.
do today?
Yes. So
Are they more protective over you now?
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. I'm very proud when I'm working with the boys.
Yeah.
They are thick and tall and walking around me and say,
Your
"Don't come
bodyguard.
here, mommy, don't tempt."
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
girls, at least, we now call ourselves sisters.
Okay.
We share as much as we can. Now they want to even share my bed with me. But there's not a single day that they don't say I love you. And that has really impacted on me.
Yeah.
Because in the past, I mean, we will say it, but it's not as frequent as
before.
yes.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
every time they would give me a hug and say that they love me. If I'm not at home, they will call and find out, "Why are you taking so long in coming home?" They are more concerned about our welfare.
Yeah.
And they become very, very understanding. I talk to them as family.
Yeah.
Sometimes we underestimate the wisdom or the intelligence of children, but they are very intelligent.
Yeah.
I mean, when I speak to my youngest daughter,
12 years old.
yeah, maybe 12. No, she's 11. She's 12 next year.
Okay.
I realize that they are very smart.
Yeah.
They know all that is happening. Sometimes they pretend they don't know, but they do know. I mean, among the children, the last one is the person who talks. The others seem to reserve their emotions, etc. But she will tell me. She will come to me and tell me what is going on, what she thinks is happening. She will ask all the questions. And I realize that they are very smart. So now we engage a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that is helpful.
Yeah. So the children have a role to play even in the
Yes,
moving
and-
on,
and-
in the
and
dealing
just-
with the grief.
Just chip in this one too.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, my son doesn't like to see a sad face. Or anytime, maybe you're even thinking about something, you're not really sad. He comes and he has this thing, "Mommy, smile a minute." So it's like you're not allowed.
Yeah.
You have to smile.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
force. He
Yeah.
says it gives, it helps your heart.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And
Yeah.
like you said, we underestimate their intellect.
Yeah.
The fact that they know things.
They are holding you more than you are holding them, right?
Yes.
Yes, they are
Yes.
great.
I was very afraid of how they will become.
Yeah.
Because they were very close to their dad.
Right.
Absolutely.
Especially the
correct.
youngest. They were
Nailed it.
very, very close with their dad.
Yeah.
So I was very troubled. But it turned out that they healed even faster than me.
Yeah.
So in the evening, they'll come to my room and make sure
You're fine.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
But what is even funny is that one day one of them said, "Mommy, we come to your room to make sure you are fine. But these days you sleep before us."
The caretakers are wondering. Now you are taking care of
Observers
yourself.
are worried.
Yes, the observers are worried. They're observing you. I mean, I guess as a child, you
Yeah.
see when your parents are weak, you see them in that
Yes,
sense, and
yes.
you want to support.
Yeah.
It's like
Yes.
They are very
you are
supportive.
scrambling to help.
Extremely
They
supportive.
are
Yeah.
very, very supportive. I
Yeah.
remember when a year, that is last July, that was 1 year after my husband died.
Okay.
One of my daughters walked up to me and said, "Mommy, it's one whole long week. Please hold yourself up. Don't cry."
Wow. Wow.
She said it because she was concerned.
Yeah.
And that shows you how supportive they are.
They are,
We
yeah.
underestimate what
Yeah.
they can
What they can do.
Yes.
Yeah. They end up
But I
supporting
think
them.
God gives them a special grace.
Grace. Yes.
Some
Sure.
strength,
Yeah.
supernatural
God gives them
strength.
a special grace.
Because you are worried that they are about to fall apart.
Yes.
And then they end
And
up
they are-
holding you from falling
Yes.
apart. Yeah. Great. So children have that role that they play, in dealing with loss. I don't know, Juliana, what's been your experience?
For me, I'm just going to encourage every person dealing with a loss to just open up, to allow yourself to be comforted. And then don't prolong your grief. It's you that determines how long you are going to prolong your grief. So you make sure you open up to listen when people come to you. God uses men to speak to us. He uses men of God, he uses friends, he uses family. So just open up and then listen. and receive your healing quickly. Because when you prolong grief, it brings diseases. It destroys your life. You are not happy, you are not sad, you feel lonely, you feel rejected. So just open up and tell yourself that I'm going to move to the next level by allowing myself to be cancelled, to be healed from these grieving stages. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to say thank you so much to you. I think in our local context, it's not often that they call the widows. You know, there's a situation where, you know, in local context, there's a lot of times when you feel forgotten as a widow. You know, and I think Reverend Ankama is somebody who doesn't forget people. He doesn't forget the conditions of people when you are sick, when you are widowed, you know, all kinds of situations that humans go through. So I had conversations with him before this, and he was very happy to have you. And so thank you so much, Dr. Ayongo, Dr. Gyimah-Asante, and Juliana Attoh for joining us in this session. I think we've had a fruitful conversation around loss. We've spoken about emptiness, we've spoken about miscarriages, and then generally about loss, where we've spoken to 3 of you who've lost your spouse. And thank you so much for opening up, for sharing. Traditionally, we don't often get to hear from widows, especially when it's not too far after what they've been through, because it's quite tough. And you've been strong today. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been Family Month, and today we've had conversations around loss. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week while we look to finish our Family Month. Thank you.
The benediction. Unto him who is able to keep you from falling and to present you blameless before his Father, I commit each and every one of you. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he lift the light of his countenance and walk you, even if it's through the valley of the shadow of death, and through the paths of teenage and youthfulness and adulthood, and even childhood, that he'll bring you to his throne and anoint you, and give you his peace both now and always. Amen.